Welcome to Tritiyo Matra. Bangladesh has a long-standing relation with the European Union. EU-Bangladesh diplomatic relations was officially established in 1973. Since then, the EU has been a strategic development partner for Bangladesh. The EU is Bangladesh's main trading partner and currently benefits from the most favorable regime available under the EU's Generalized Scheme of Preferences, GSP, namely the Everything But Arms EBA arrangement. Today, to discuss the further of EU-Bangladesh relations, we have with us Charles Whiteley, Ambassador and Head of Delegation of the EU to Bangladesh. After reading law at Downing College, Cambridge, and qualifying as a barrister in the UK, he began working for the European Union in 1999. As an EU official, he has covered human rights and democratization issues and has been posted to the EU missions in Bangladesh and Indonesia at different times, where he has dealt with political, human rights and trade relations issues. Ambassador, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
What has been your personal experience in Bangladesh so far after taking office?
Well, as you mentioned, I've been here before. I was posted here from 2005 to 9, which was a very interesting time to be in Bangladesh. And I was very happy to get posted back here as ambassador. When I was here before, I was deputy. So I learned a lot about Bangladesh in those first years of work here. I think now you see a Bangladesh that's transforming very quickly and rapidly. So it's 13 years since I left, and I'm very happy to come back to Dhaka and see the amazing changes that have happened here over those years in terms of infrastructure and development. Human development categories have all improved in Bangladesh in recent years. And that's also had an effect on how we work with Bangladesh as the European Union. I think when I left in 2009, a main feature of our engagement with Bangladesh was development assistance, which was an important part of our relationship. Now it's still there in a smaller way, but it's accompanied by big differences in terms of how we engage with Bangladesh on many, many issues, from maritime connectivity to human connectivity, people-to-people links, climate change, green transition, energy. I think all these things make for a broad-based relationship. And what I've very much appreciated doing in my 9 months here since I arrived as ambassador is to travel around Bangladesh and see also how things are outside Dhaka. I've been to Chittagong, to the Chittagong Hill Tracks, and that was very interesting to see Chittagong, because that city has also changed quite a lot in 12, 13 years. So I look forward to my tenure here and to being able to be part of relations with Bangladesh for the next 2 or 3 years.
Ambassador, Bangladesh is currently on track to graduate from LDC status. While this is a matter of great pride for you, there is a concern that the change will lead to Bangladesh losing the current preferential trade arrangements with the EU. What is the process for Bangladesh to negotiate new trade agreements with the EU after graduation?
Well, everything's under process already. I think we have clarity on what the transition will be. So Bangladesh will remain under the existing rules and regulations for access to the EU market until 2029. So there's a 3-year transition period, and then Bangladesh will be able to join the GSP Plus regime, which has a few more conditions attached. For example, the ratification and implementation of 32 international conventions. Bangladesh has already ratified those conventions, so it's made a very important step in the direction of accessing GSP Plus. And that GSP Plus regime is basically the same as the conditions of duty-free, quota-free access that Bangladesh enjoys now. So I think we all have an interest and a stake in making sure that transition is smooth and without problems. And I think already there's a lot of work on the government side here and on the business side, by key industry leaders like BGMEA and BKMEA. They're already very well engaged and aware of this change. So I think everything that needs to be done at the moment, many years ahead of the actual change, is underway, and we're certainly determined to work with Bangladesh to help to fulfill these conditions.
You have been to several events now to discuss the current FDI climate and problems in logistics in Bangladesh. What are your thoughts on Bangladesh's economy from a foreign investment perspective? What do you think Bangladesh can do to attract more foreign investment?
Well, I think clearly investment is very important, and it's a two-way thing. We see that the European Union is one of the largest investors in Bangladesh, and we want to increase that further. There's definitely interest from European business across many different sectors, because people see what's happening to the Bangladesh economy. They see the sustained growth rates. They see the rise of an educated workforce, a youthful workforce. They see the startups that are coming in Dhaka and elsewhere in Bangladesh. So it's an exciting place for business to look at. And I think what's key is, once you get the attention of business and potential investors, that the rules and regulations that apply to foreign businesses are favourable. So we have a dialogue regularly with the government, our business climate dialogue, to discuss how to improve the attractiveness of Bangladesh as an investment destination. And that's certainly underway. But I can give you one example. In the logistics sector, there's quite a heavy involvement of foreign firms, European firms. And I think since 2015, there's been a rule that says that a foreign firm can only have a 49% stake in logistics business. So clearly that's not a huge attraction to a firm. You know, if you can only have less than half of the ownership in something you're investing heavily in, it might not work entirely in the right way. So these kind of issues, the government is very receptive to discussing, and we are discussing. And I really hope to see investment taking off more and more. We're launching an initiative in the final quarter of this year called EU-Bangladesh Meaning Business, which will concentrate on different sectors where there's potential for growth, for example, ICT, green business. And I think that will benefit both European business and Bangladesh business. And we want to see, you know, a vibrant relationship. I think when I look at other countries not so far away from Bangladesh, take Vietnam, it's an example I always look to. They have a far smaller population than Bangladesh, but 3 times as much investment from European companies. And I think the way that the Bangladesh economy is going now, we can definitely see this kind of growth and improvement in European investment.
Great. Ambassador Charles Whiteley, one of the economic bottlenecks right now seems to be Bangladesh's lack of skilled labor. Is the EU interested in facilitating human resource development projects in order to allow further strategic and economic cooperation with the European Union?
We're certainly interested in that. I think what we're seeing is individual EU member states who are discussing this possibility with the Bangladesh government. I think what we want to see is to boost the options for legal pathways to go and work in Europe. Perhaps at the moment it's a little bit too difficult to go and work in Europe and get experience and bring your experience to Europe. And there seems to be a sort of focus on illegal migration. So, we see young Bangladeshis who try to get to Europe, crossing the seas in dangerous conditions. And we definitely want to boost the options for legal entry to work. And one of those is the talent partnership. So the European Commission announced a few weeks ago that Bangladesh will be one of the priority countries for discussing the possibility of a talent partnership. And what a talent partnership will do is that Bangladeshis working in different sectors, perhaps the health sector or in other sectors where Europe needs such expertise, Bangladeshis will be able to go for 4 years to Europe and work and gain more experience and share their skills, but also boost their skills by learning also from the European experience. And then they will come back to Bangladesh after 4 years. So I think what we don't want to do is have a brain drain. Bangladesh needs its skilled workers. And what you do tend to see in some circumstances is very talented Bangladeshis going abroad and then not returning to Bangladesh. Our scheme will hopefully encourage them to return and bring back the skills they've acquired in Europe and benefit the Bangladesh economy further. So we all win. Europe wins by having Bangladeshi workers with talents, and then Bangladesh wins by having the workers back when they've had experience elsewhere.
Mr. Ambassador, as you know that currently Bangladesh is still highly reliant on the RMG sector as the primary driver of exports. Do you believe that Bangladesh should diversify in terms of trade? What other potential sectors might Bangladesh be able to specialize in and compete with in the world market?
I think everybody believes that diversification is necessary, industry, government, foreign partners. I think we still see a very heavy concentration, as you say, on the RMG. I think it's over 80% of exports. So what I would say is, first of all, we have to appreciate what's happened with the garments because it's been driven by the hard work and entrepreneurialism of Bangladeshi business. But it's important to diversify that trade basket because you never know what shocks will happen in the world system in the future. And you do see sectors that are growing and have huge potential, whether it's pharmaceuticals or green business, startups, ICT. It can also be in the skills sector. It doesn't have to be in products that are sent abroad. And I think there's a lot of interest when I talk to trade chambers here. There's a lot of interest in fostering other sectors. I know the OECD, we're funding through the European Union, the OECD team who've been in Dhaka recently to look at which sectors have the most potential. And that's also supported by the government here and the Ministry of Commerce. So I think it will happen naturally because there are broader ranges of skills now in Bangladesh that can contribute to different sectors very successfully. And I think we want to encourage that because it also provides us with more investment potential.
Bangladesh has received generous support from the EU during the COVID pandemic and also to deal with the ongoing Rohingya refugee crisis. Will the EU continue to provide support for the ongoing refugee situation in the country?
I think first of all on COVID, I would really pay tribute to what the government and authorities and people did here to get Bangladesh through the pandemic. I think Bangladesh stands out, and this is recognised in international surveys and analysis, stands out as a country that handled the pandemic very well. And that wasn't just because of international partners bringing in support, it was also because of what was done, of course, through policy and through support domestically. So I think it's important to recognise that achievement. On the Rohingya front, we have been a consistent donor to the camps, to Cox's Bazar. I think we'll be bringing on stream humanitarian and other assistance this year to the tune of over €50 million. And we have to be there because international partners have to recognise that Bangladesh is doing a huge work in providing for more than 1 million refugees. It's now 5 years since the refugees arrived. We all remember under what awful circumstances that happened in Myanmar that drove these poor people out of Myanmar. And Bangladesh provided them a home when they needed it. And of course it's right and proper that the government talks about the need for the refugees to go home in a voluntary and safe way. And we very much support that need for the refugees to go home when it's safe to do so. Unfortunately, the conditions aren't quite there yet but in Myanmar. Mm-hmm. But we will carry on providing funding. We're going to be funding also projects on Bhasan Char because as we understand it, there may be up to 80 or 100,000 refugees that will be relocated to Bhasan Char. And they need the same services as the refugees in Cox's Bazar. They need food and education and livelihoods and support and all these things that prepare them for going back to Myanmar when that can be achieved.
Just what about the long-term perspective for the Rohingya people to you? And do you believe it is possible to facilitate repatriation in Myanmar in the near future?
I think we all have to push for that. I think we clearly see that the government and regime in Myanmar isn't necessarily engaging as well as possible as it should on this issue. And they should recognise that their neighbour Bangladesh is having to provide for 1 million refugees that belong back in Myanmar. So I have to say I'm not massively optimistic that the conditions will be in place. There are discussions, of course, going on between the government of Bangladesh and the government of Myanmar to try to expedite return. And we very much support anything that can help create the conditions to return the refugees when it's safe to do so. We are putting pressure on the Myanmar regime. We have sanctions in place. We have suspended our development assistance. We have an arms embargo. We are bringing the resolutions in the United Nations every year in the Human Rights Council and trying to persuade others that this has to be done, that all the violations of human rights in Myanmar should be addressed. And one key angle that we don't forget is accountability. The accountability for the terrible crimes that have been perpetrated against Rohingya, the crimes against humanity. We all know the terrible stories. And I think in order to make it safe and psychologically safe for the refugees to go home, we need to continue supporting international processes, in the International Criminal Court and in other International Court of Justice that will give some support to ensuring that those who committed these crimes are in the end brought to justice. But we certainly support the need for return as soon as possible, but I am a little pessimistic that the international community will achieve that imminently. It's not there yet.
Here is another issue. The world is currently reeling from the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. And what has been the effect of the invasion of Ukraine on Europe as a whole in your view?
Well, first of all, I'd speak about the human impact. We have 5 million refugees, many, many children that are being forced out of their homes. They're now, many millions have moved to other countries in Europe, the European Union. But we've also seen that the alleged crimes against humanity that have happened with hospitals and schools and other institutions being bombed and people being killed in their thousands in Ukraine because of the Russian aggression. And all of that means that Ukraine is now facing a terrible predicament, infrastructure being destroyed, people dying, and the European Union is doing what it can to be supportive, as you know, but the human cost of this war is immense, and that's borne by the Ukrainian people, but it's also, as you know, having an impact in the wider world, having an impact in terms of price rises, commodity price rises, fuel rises, fertilizer difficulties, disrupting transport networks, and all of this has an impact on citizens here in Bangladesh as well. We see the price rises that are going on that are partly fueled by the war. So what we want to see is an end to the food crisis as well. 20 million tons of grain are trapped in Ukraine and aren't being transported to their markets. That's because of the Russian blockade. Agricultural workers who are needed to harvest the upcoming harvest are fighting in the war. Men and women are fighting, so they can't keep the agricultural system ticking over. Agricultural infrastructure is being targeted and destroyed in Ukraine. And Ukraine, used to be known as the breadbasket of the world. So half of the World Food Programme's grain supplying to the poorest people on the planet in Africa comes from Ukraine. What impact is it going to have in Africa, for example? So the human cost of this war is incalculable, and there's only one way to stop this war. We want this war to end, and by diplomatic or other means, but only one person ultimately can end it tomorrow, and of course that person is in Russia. And we would like to see an end to the human suffering that this war is inflicting, not only in Europe, but also around the world.
Mr. Charles Whiteley, do you believe that it is possible to end the war through diplomatic channels?
I think we have to have faith in diplomacy, and there are nations who are trying to intercede and trying to encourage a peaceful end to this crisis. I hope that all sides will listen, because that's, of course, a precondition for diplomacy to work. You have to have all sides around the table. We want that to, a negotiated or a peaceful, I should say, settlement to this, because otherwise people will carry on dying. And frankly, I don't see much openness to diplomatic solutions from the Russian side. I hope that will change, and change very quickly, because certainly from the EU side, we would very much encourage an end to the violence as soon as possible and a return to normality for the people of Ukraine.
There are many who attribute the conflict as an inevitable effect of alleged NATO expansionism. What role do you believe NATO has played in the current conflict, if any?
Well, I think NATO, when people try to lay the blame at NATO's door for provoking somehow this aggression, we have to remember that sovereign countries, any sovereign country, can decide for itself what organizations to join. It would be a bit like saying Bangladesh can't be a member of SARC, or Bangladesh can't be a member of BIMSTEC. A European country that has an interest in collective defense, because let's not forget NATO is predicated on defense. It's not an aggressive militaristic alliance. It's about defending states from attack and a collective commitment to defense. To say to countries in Europe who've been forcibly kept in the Soviet Union for decades that they can't join as a newly sovereign nation, a given organization, I think I don't think any sovereign state would accept such a limitation. But I think what's important is that, it's also important, of course, that the conditions are there that ensure peace in Europe, and that means a constant dialogue. NATO had very developed contacts with Russia for many years to create confidence building and reassure others that the NATO alliance isn't predicated on offensive behavior. So for me, it's a red herring when we talk about this. When we try to lay the blame for the war at NATO's door, the blame for this war is clearly the aggression, the invasion of sovereign states, the invasion of territorial borders, internationally recognized territorial borders, the breach of the UN Charter. There's only one country that's responsible for that.
There was initially much talk of the prospect of Ukraine joining the EU. However, now there seems to be quite a bit of resistance to the idea. What are your thoughts on that matter?
And if anything, I think minds have been moved very quickly on this in the European Union. Ukraine has now been offered candidate status, or it's been proposed and agreed by the heads of state and government in the European Union. So everybody now acknowledges that Ukraine is on a European pathway to ultimate membership of the European Union. Of course, to join the EU is a very complicated process. It means adopting all the laws and regulations of the EU and having a functioning market economy. There are all different conditions for joining. And states, you look at states from the former Soviet Union, like Poland, who had to work very hard adopting the laws of Europe, changing their legal systems to be compatible. Otherwise, if you're not compatible, it will create instability. So we need to ensure that there's this political acknowledgement for Ukraine's membership of EU, which is now in place. And then we need to give all the assistance that's necessary for Ukraine to meet the conditions. And that's what's happening. The EU is providing billions to Ukraine to adjust to that ultimately. But clearly, the first thing that has to happen is the war has to end, and then Ukraine can be in a position to prepare for membership. So I think the political will is there for Ukraine to join the EU, and it will happen. It will take some time, but it will happen.
Mr. Ambassador, the war in Ukraine and many other events in the world seem to be pushing up the level of intolerance and polarization in the world. Do you believe that the world now is a more divided one than a decade ago? And what do you think will be the future of Europe after the dust settles?
I think clearly there are global divisions, and they're very worrying. There are divisions on whether multilateralism is the right way to rule or engage as a global community. We in the European Union and Bangladesh indeed are very committed to multilateralism and finding multilateral solutions to multilateral problems, whether it be climate change or other issues. So for us, I think it's a difficult time for multilateralism, and the international community is divided on that. But we have to remember, certainly from a European point of view, in the last decades of European history, not only have we had wars, of course, the Second World War and so on the European continent, but we had a Europe that was divided by the Iron Curtain until the late 1980s. So, some changes have been positive, but globally, I think you're right to say, I think we're living in uncertain times. The world is now a multipolar world with rising powers. It's not just a division of the world order between the US and the Soviet Union. There are very important powers coming through. And we have to acknowledge that as a fact, and we have to work together collaboratively where we can. But again, just going back to what's happening in Europe now, clearly this is a very dangerous time for Europe, a dangerous time for stability in Europe, and that means that the world is divided in some sense because of the war in Europe, and we need to address that as soon as we can. So I think if we can find peace again, all these global challenges like climate change, we see the floods in Bangladesh now exacerbated by the effects of climate change. We need to work together to address that, and if we don't, then we will all suffer, and certainly the EU is a firm believer in working together and not encouraging division in the world. We want to work constructively with all our partners.
In South Asia, a different kind of tension is brewing, particularly with the rise of China's investment in South Asian economies, their Belt and Road project, and their recent rhetoric regarding Taiwan. The common perception here is that Western nations are stepping up their regional presence through military collaboration such as Quad and AUKUS, forming a kind of NATO of the East. Do you agree with the sentiment, and what are your thoughts regarding the general escalation of militarization in Asia?
For us, I can only speak for the European Union, of course, and for the European Union, we have a big stake in the Asian, South Asia, but also in the Indo-Pacific. We adopted, as you may know, an Indo-Pacific strategy which has 7 priorities, and that's all based, again, to return to my answer to the last question, on collaboration with other states, on maritime security, freedom of navigation. I think we all have a stake in freedom of navigation just to get goods to market and having an efficient transport system around the world. So what we're interested in is preserving the rule of law internationally, and ensuring that disputes, maritime disputes or territorial disputes are settled peacefully. And that applies all over the world, whether it's in Europe or Asia. We want to see that happen through negotiated settlement where there are tensions. As you say, there are tensions in many parts of the world. And the EU is always a voice for negotiation and peaceful resolution of such conflicts. And through our Indo-Pacific strategy, we want to increase our engagement. We engage, of course, with China as a huge partner, with India as a huge partner. Bangladesh is very strategically placed. It's has a stable outlook in a difficult region, and that's why we're going to be building very much on our relations with Bangladesh to reflect the fact that Bangladesh has a stabilizing influence in this region, and also believes in the international rule of law, freedom of navigation, and all the things that we want to achieve at the UN and in other multilateral conversations, including through our Indo-Pacific strategy. But if I may just mention, you mentioned Belt and Road. Of course, every sovereign nation can decide from whom they take loans, from whom they take assistance. The European Union has just adopted a new strategy called Global Gateway, which is our infrastructure initiative, which will try to provide substantial amounts of funds to our partners for infrastructure and other people-to-people connectivity projects by blending grants, as we've always done, but blending that with loans from the European Investment Bank. And we're looking into that here in Bangladesh very keenly in the energy sector. And I think that's an alternative way of doing business. You can choose to work with different international partners, but we want to be able to provide the kind of high-scale, high-level packages of funds that will help countries develop infrastructure without reliance on workers from Europe, or without reliance on conditions that will bring indebtedness to different states. Because I think we've seen that indebtedness can, of course, encourage instability, and sometimes that can happen in other partnerships.
Chelsea, the South Asia region is host to some of the most rapidly growing economies. However, the nations and people of the region are not integrated. Do you believe that regional integration should be an important goal all South Asian nations should pursue?
I think certainly from our European experience, and of course we can't teach other regions lessons. We've got our own experience. There are different histories, cultures and traditions in different regions. But from our experience, I think one of the great achievements of the European Union has been to bring our own citizens together. So, we have a single market where there's free movement of goods and services and people. So, if I'm a Greek academic and I want to go to Italy or to the Netherlands, I can move as a citizen, and I have rights as an EU citizen that complement my rights as a national, as a Greek or an Italian and so on. And we see in Europe how that brings people together. And I think it also boosts our economy. The fewer barriers that you have to trade and commerce, the more prosperity you can bring. So, there is SAARC. Bangladesh, of course, is a member of various regional organizations, SAARC and BIMSTEC. I served in Indonesia, where we see ASEAN accelerating the integration process. And states do this not because they want to share their sovereignty, but because they see clearly the advantages of working together. So I would definitely, from a European perspective, we think regional integration is a good recipe, and it can bring prosperity, and it can bring understanding and harmony amongst peoples. So I think it has to be done in a way that benefits and is congenial to each state. So we don't give lessons, but we certainly say we have experienced the positive side effects of regional integration in Europe.
You were talking about Bangladesh's strategic position. Do you think Bangladesh could play an important role in facilitating regional integration in the region?
I think Bangladesh could certainly play that role. I mean, BIMSTEC, of course, has its secretariat here in Dhaka. Bangladesh is an influential member of SAARC and BIMSTEC. So I think Bangladesh also has the foreign policy mantra, friendship to all, malice to none. And that means that, in a sense, Bangladesh is well placed to be an honest broker and is trusted by partners. So I think that influence can be brought to bear and is being brought to bear in different processes. The Indian Ocean Rim Association, or Bangladesh's chairmanship of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, as an authoritative voice and a trusted voice. So in diplomatic terms, I think Bangladesh's weight and influence is clearly increasing, not just regionally, but globally. And I think that's a very good thing. And Bangladesh, I served in New York for 4 years at the UN. Bangladesh always emphasized the UN Charter and peaceful resolution of disputes, and that kind of messaging is a key starting point to ensuring people live together in their neighborhood in the right way.
You have previously stated that Bangladesh should cooperate with its neighbors, particularly regarding energy generation. Do you think the formation of a regional energy market is possible between Bangladesh, India, Bhutan, and Nepal in the near future? Will the EU be interested in spreading such a project?
I think that's definitely underway. There's a lot of serious scrutiny of this and efforts to make this a reality. I mean, hydropower is a relatively clean source of energy, renewable, so it's highly desirable that where there are energy shortcomings in one country, if you can get energy at the right moment in time from another country easily and cheaply, then it's very beneficial. And I think there are discussions and deliberations underway to achieve this. The EU is very supportive of this. We're ready to bring financial support as well. We have that capability. We want to support renewable energy in Bangladesh. I think it's great that the government has set a target of 40% of renewable energy by 2041. I should say that at present in the European Union, we're only generating 22%, or I should say the consumed energy, only 22% of the energy our people consume comes from renewable sources. So we all have work to do on this. But Bangladesh has an ambitious target. And one of our 3 priorities for the next 7 years in Bangladesh is the green transition, where the government wants European Union support and where we can bring in technical assistance. We're very happy to do so and work in collaboration with the authorities here and also with the European Investment Bank. So the European Investment Bank team will be coming to Bangladesh in late July to explore how we can leverage funds, loans and grants blended to support energy activities. And a little bit further down the line, we will have funding under our regional funding mechanism to support, if it's wanted, the hydropower projects regionally with Nepal and others, so, and India, of course. So it's there, the possibility. There are others who want to do this. Many people are interested in Bangladesh now on the energy front. So I hope we can be competitive and I hope we can bring our support to bear.
Bangladesh is also currently one of the most vulnerable nations when it comes to the effects of climate change. What are your current thoughts on Bangladesh's climate mitigation and adaptation initiatives? Will the European Union provide further assistance to Bangladesh when it comes to combating climate change?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, Bangladesh is first of all very influential on the diplomatic stage with this. It's a voice, and why is it a voice that's listened to? Not only because it has good homegrown ideas, but also because, as you say, Bangladesh is on the front line of climate change. And you know, when you see the predictions that 30 million Bangladeshis may have to move internally in due course because of climate change, that's a pretty unsettling scenario. So I think the world has to be respectful of the fact that Bangladesh speaks out on climate change because it's experiencing already some of the impacts of climate change. And what I like about Bangladesh is its homegrown innovation on this front, you know, the adaptation that goes on. When I was here in my first posting already 15 years ago, you know, I visited sites where, you know, crops were on floating apparatus to cope with fluctuating water levels. So yeah. I think Bangladesh can teach lessons to the world about adaptation, but we are supporting projects. We have what we call our Logic project, which is with local government in different areas of Bangladesh, supporting grassroots activities to adapt to climate change, and we're very happy with how that's going. And we will be bringing on stream further support for climate change. As I said, it's one of our 3 priorities for the next 7 years. And I think we in the West, you know, who've polluted for long, it's incumbent upon the EU and others to ensure we deliver on climate change funding globally. We are delivering $100 billion of support. I don't think everybody in the international community is meeting the pledges they've made, including at COP26 in Glasgow. And the forthcoming COP in Egypt will be a chance to also hold to account those who aren't coming forward with climate change funding. And of course, in Europe, we have quite strict targets for reducing our emissions. So, you know, we have this Fit for 55 package, a reduction of 55% in our emissions by 2030 as compared to 1990, and we're very serious about meeting those targets. And all of this is part of the picture, you know, emissions reduction, mitigation, as you said, funding from developed states for those countries that are suffering the most from climate change, and it's important that we meet these obligations.
In order to qualify for GSP plus benefits, a nation must be eligible for several international conventions on human rights, labor rights, the environment and good governance. In your opinion, what is Bangladesh's current standing on those international conventions?
Well, Bangladesh has ratified all 32 conventions that are the key requirement for accessing GSP+, so accessing the continued duty-free, basically duty-free and quota-free access to the European Union market. So that's a big job. I mean, you know, ratifying 32 conventions in the environmental sphere, labour rights sphere, human rights sphere, it's a key step, and that's, you know, I don't think there are many countries in the world who would meet that criterion. So I think we, as I mentioned, we have a further 7 years until the transition kicks in, and in the transition time, when we reach 2029, then the key question will be implementation of the conventions. So there's a whole process that kicks in to engage between the EU and Bangladesh and our other partners who are in the GSP scheme on the implementation of those conventions. So it's so far so good, I would say. So far so very good in terms of preparing the ground. And the government and, as I said, industry, we are working hard to work for a smooth transition, because it's in nobody's interest to disrupt this key exchange, this key trading exchange is the biggest destination in Europe for Bangladeshi exports, and we want that to continue.
Ambassador, the upcoming elections in Bangladesh will have a massive impact on the nation's future direction. Bangladesh has an unfortunately history of controversial elections. The EU didn't send an observer during the last election. However, you have stated that the European Union will closely observe the elections this time around. What prompted this change in position from the EU?
No, but I think we follow closely any election everywhere. You know, elections are key turning points in the history of nations, and all over the world, I think everybody watches everybody elections, because it's preparing for you have to understand the political scene in a given country, and that's certainly what we try to understand here in Bangladesh. We haven't taken any decision to propose an election observation mission to Bangladesh. We send election observation missions to quite a few countries every year around the world, but we're not at that stage yet. I think we have to remember the elections are still quite a long way away. It's 18 months or so before the elections, and already people are talking about the elections, of course, and there's a lot of interest and attention, but it's still a long time, 18 months. So we are reflecting on whether to propose such an mission, but otherwise it's obviously a key event in the life of any nation, the elections. So of course we will follow it with great attention.
You had a meeting with the Election Commission recently.
Indeed, yes. Yes, we did.
How was it?
Very interesting. Okay. I mean, the Chief Election Commissioner was very open and discussed about preparations, for the elections. And of course, it's a new team, the Election Commission. So I think it was a very good opportunity for us to understand better the mechanisms in Bangladesh, that are there for elections and the preparations that are being made. And understanding is very important, because if you don't understand, you can't. One of the tasks of any foreign representative in a given country is to report to capital on what's going on, and it's essential to talk to everybody to get that understanding of what's going on.
Charles, we are almost at the end of the program, so would you like to add anything for the viewers?
I would say, Bangladesh there's so much happening in Bangladesh. I want to take EU-Bangladesh relations to a next level, and I think we look forward to doing that in the coming years. And there are so many key areas where we can work together, and so many areas where we need to work together in a changing world. So I look forward to that challenge, and I wish your viewers well, and you well, and Channel I well.
Ambassador Charles Whiteley, thank you so much. Thanks for your time and thoughts. Indeed, we had a wonderful time and discussion.
Thank you too.
Dear viewers, the Bangladesh economy has grown steadily even through the COVID-19 pandemic. However, it must be ensured that the growth is sustainable and that all citizens of Bangladesh are able to share in the fruits of success. As we continue to grow and develop, we hope to maintain strong relations with our strategic development partners in the EU, and I look forward to their guidance and expertise in this new chapter of our history with the LDC graduation. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.